your fire. Dear awakening souls out there, welcome to the here and now. In this episode, we're going to dive into a very interesting, powerful archetype, the hero's journey. And we'll look at what actually happens on this healing journey and how we can maximize its help as a tool that will carry us through this journey as well. I'm your host, Roxana Fiamma, your spiritual guide, hero's journey and transformation coach. And this is the Conscious Cruising Podcast. The hero's journey to wholeness is used in psychology as a healing tool because it has found a common thread in all of our stories, from Ulysses to Neo in the Matrix to the guy who delivers your mail, to yourself. Joseph Campbell was the writer who coined the term the hero's journey in his book A Hero of a Thousand Faces, in which he describes the monomyth and how it works. How many times have you heard this story? Out of the blue, the protagonist is taken away from the ordinary life to be confronted with an unexpected journey that promises adventure and peril. Along the way, the hero makes new friends, but also faces challenges that test his character, his strength, and his skills. Or hers. In fact, it's an ultimate battle that tests the hero's resolve. In the end, the evil is defeated and the hero returns home a changed person and with gifts bestowing hands, as the Buddha would say while telling the allegory to his disciples. Before I continue, I'd like to remind you that the Conscious Cruising Podcast is for those who choose to evolve and learn how to adapt, overcome and conquer the external forces that forge us and initiate us on the way to our authentic self, a state of being that will open us to our true power and potential. So if you wish to support this, why not like and share the video and subscribe to the channel to help it grow into a community of awakened individuals, all living with the same goal in mind: freedom and personal sovereignty. Storytelling not only is closely tied with our personal experiences when we identify with the characters, it is the very essence of our ego and individuality. It's intrinsically connected to the way we perceive our identity. If this sounds familiar, that's because this exact narrative template has inspired countless of stories, from ancient myths to modern screenplays. The template is also known as the monomyth. That is to say that stories are similar over time and in different cultures. And the hero's journey is a common narrative archetype that involves a hero who goes on an adventure, learns a lesson, wins a victory with that newfound knowledge, and then returns home transformed, ready to help other people. All stories and the modern imagination, movies, films, whatever we look at, has patterns. That's why archetypes are a great help in navigating the invisible and the unconscious. Archetypes are a kind of visual language They help in how to understand the symbols of everyday life as representing something beyond themselves, as alluding to invisible worlds. What I call the feminine, actually. The feminine represents the invisible world, the unconscious. Whether we think of that as spiritual or psychological isn't as important. What's important is that we have some kind of openness to it, that we know more than we know that we know. I'm attracted to the poets, the writers, and the artists. And Joseph Campbell as well thought that they would be able to see the future. Archetypes are the best guides to what has not yet happened, what others do not see yet. And that's why I have become fascinated in very recent months with the study of tarot. Tarot are archetypes, and archetypes will give us the inner life that will be necessary to become who we might be able to become. And that's why I love literature so much. One thing studying myth or archetypes will do is make us aware that nothing is entirely new, that any experience we have been facing is something that has happened to others, and they have left us clues. So mythology helps us to get through everyday challenges. We can see the guidance that has been left to us from those who came this way before. And it is interpreted primarily through imagery. A picture carries 1,000 words, and if we can study what the pictures in old stories, in dreams, in movies, cultures at any time, what the images are telling us, we can understand things on a deeper level. And there is one main story, the monomyth, the hero's journey, that is told again and again. It is essentially a journey story, a quest. When you diagram the hero's journey, it's customarily depicted as a circle. You start at the top. A calling takes you away from the ordinary, and there is a descent. You cross the threshold into a place you have not been before. There are companions, allies, mentors, and opponents. There are ordeals. There is a good deal of suffering. At the bottom, the dark night of the soul, it gets really hard. There is a death and rebirth experience waiting for the hero. The redemption is the rising up to the other side of the circle. And there are several lessons to be learned on the way back. Finally, a return threshold crossing when you re-enter the place you left. You are changed forever. When there are difficult times, it might be a vocational movement. It could be that trouble is calling us to a change. If we don't have trouble, there is no reason to learn anything. We can stay in our comfort zone. But when things get difficult, we might have to stretch and find new ways of looking at things. So what Joseph Campbell referred to as the calling is usually bad news, the beginning of the story, the beginning of the adventure. Something goes wrong. In a person's life, it could be a divorce or a financial setback or an illness. In a collective, a community life, it's a natural disaster or a political shift or a financial crisis of some kind. Something happens that makes us start again. And we have to go looking for new answers. So what we have in difficult times, like a calling to go, that's where we learn something new. It could be that these moments, and there is upheaval in so many ways in the world right now, it could be that this is a turning point, a calling, that we're being drawn over a threshold into a new way of looking at things. So applying the hero's journey right now, it's perfect for everyone because of what's happening in the world right now. When things call you to a certain direction, one particular dynamic that keeps on happening in your life, that's a kind of calling from life, from God, from the universe that requires you to go within and look at yourself, because maybe it's you making that pattern carrying on in your life. This is vocation, this is the calling, the thing that pulls you away from the familiar. We leave the maternal, we leave the goddess, the original divine oneness that we experience as infants. Collectively, well, in history at least, there were times when the sacred saturated community life. Everybody believed and everything was sacred. Not anymore. We came to a more instrumental, practical, technological way of thinking about things. And that is progress. But something was lost in that progress. So we go off into new learning and we find powers and we gain access to mysteries and we survive this. We come back wiser for our trouble, older and wiser, and we make a new life for ourselves and for the community. And then there is the question of what was lost, what it cost. And we need to revisit how we have lost balance at times and need to regain that. In our case, the hero's journey is the inward journey to heal ourselves. But when we become triumphant, we find at the end of the journey that we have achieved what we wanted to achieve. But the purpose, it includes the benefit of the whole community. And when you find your purpose, you find the strength to overcome everything. And the winds of change will help you. If you're working for the good of all, life will always sustain you. And when you are coming back, all you want to do is to exchange, and you want to share what you know. So the word adventure, to go back to the adventure calling at the beginning of the journey, the word adventure sounds really bold, and the quest is very demanding. It requires a great deal of courage. There is much warrior language that is used, but again, the warrior language is another archetype. And the real journeys are very rarely about going off to war. There might be an internal war. There may be fighting with our demons and struggling to free ourselves from all thinking. And you need to be really strong in order to overcome those. But boldness of one kind or another, whether it is physical strength or more often moral courage, that is the ability to stand up to the criticism of others, the doubts of others, and our own doubts in order to step into the new. That is the warrior stance, which we often use masculine language for. And masculine and feminine is another archetype. And in times of crisis, we need to take the stance, the seeker stance, that I must go, I must find what needs to be known. So when faced with a big adventure, a new learning experience, we often have reluctance. We tend to cling to our innocence, which is a kind of ignorance, really. These hesitations often have to do with an attachment to innocence, an attachment to an old way of looking at something, and a mistrust of the possibility that we could do things an entirely new way, that we might be able to cooperate with others. But that's again represented by another archetype, which is the child. And the child is always the first one we have to face in order to be ready to respond to the call of adventure. And this is how I use the hero's journey in my coaching. And that innocence is sort of lovely, but is also very limited. So the child, the archetype child, needs to face certain things in order to answer that call. And with deprogramming, we look at that, we look at those limitations, why they are, and then we overcome them. And the hero's journey, it's not about criticizing the seeker for hesitation. It's normal, it's natural. it's actually an important stage of the overall success of the quest. And we need to tend it. Basically, we need to face and look at everything that comes from within at every step of the way. So this hesitation, it's preparatory. It's a dress rehearsal. These are important moments. In history, collectively, we seem to learn the same lessons again and again. The call comes again, and again we blow it. We set up international peacemaking bodies and then don't fund them. I mean, we have these mistakes that seems to reappear time and time again. But I believe this time round it's going to be different. All good stories have allies, lots of them. For example, the story of Tom Sawyer has Huckleberry Finn. Neo has Morpheus. The Little Women are a group. It seems like our lives are solitary adventures, that a hero's journey refers to one seeker or traveler. But in fact, these things are done in groups. The stories of the Knights of the Round Table are groups of knights going out to solve problems or be of service. So we need to be good team players as well. The fantasy of individual identity is a huge problem to overcome. The innermost cave is our own fear. That is, individually, the things that go bump in the night deep inside each of us. Collectively, the innermost cave would be the unknown, and we are constantly facing the unknown. And it seems like history is speeding up, so we're facing it more often. And we need to be wise as we let go of old ideas and trusting that new possibilities will emerge that are every bit as good and probably better. The real challenge is control. The real challenge is being able to let go of what we know and our smugness and our attachment to it and our arrogance, that it's the best idea ever thought of, and realize there is always going to be something better. And then, death. Finally, things fall apart. It is a death experience. And there's a good book by Pema Chodron, I think it's pronounced like that, that's entitled When Things Fall Apart, and I highly recommend it if you're going through a difficult time. So finally things fall apart. It's a death experience. It is the death of old ideas, maybe of old you. It is the death of how we have been looking at ourselves individually and collectively. Jonah ends up in the belly of the great fish. Little Red Riding Hood is in the belly of the wolf. That is, the belly of the beast is being devoured by change, being devoured by our fears. And it would seem, in a rational story, that's the end, that's a tragic end to the story. You've just died. But these are magical stories. They're archetypes. Or at least they are maps that point us past what we have known how to control. So we have the potential of rebirth. We might come back from this endpoint and have a whole new story to live out. And this is when we retell our stories, actually, because our identities are based on our stories. And this is the crucial part of my coaching. And hopefully we will learn from our previous arrogance and our previous mistakes so that we don't head straight into death again, that perhaps we can set out things that will work a little bit better. To people who have always seen things a certain way, it feels terrible when these ideas are shaken, but they really must go. We are very slowly and begrudgingly moving a little more towards equality. We don't have as many kings and queens on the planet anymore. And we're heading towards a time where there will be no celebrity. The age of celebrity is dead. And everybody will be unique. Nobody will compete. and everybody will lead from their own uniqueness, will have something to give to other people. So we will all be leaders. We have democracy right now, and yet there is an old hierarchy that dies hard, that is not going away very quickly. And every now and then, there's a step back when people would try to reconstitute very old ideas that weren't very good even in their time. So progress is always 2 steps forward and 1 step back. And the fact that there is a reversal does not mean that the whole story is over. It's just a temporary setback. It's death-like, though. And it feels like death. The people that have had privilege and have to lose some of it feel like they're being cheated. In fact, they were the ones who've been cheating all along. So the change is towards fairness. But it does feel like that to the person that is losing some advantage. The metaphor of death might involve real death as well. That is, there might be illness or wars or injury of some kind. But it really represents something dying. It's a view, it's a belief system, it's a certain perspective. It's for the best. It doesn't feel like that, but later you see that it makes space. The dying makes space for something to be born, something better. And then it brings you to empowerment. There is a moment of empowerment in the mythic journey. It is something that the individual experiences, and we experience it in teams and communities as well. It's often pictured as receiving a special weapon or a tool, a sword or a new technology. It represents a new skill, that is, a new knowledge, some kind of wisdom, some kind of understanding that will allow us to build what is called for. And so once we have the weapon, let's call it a sword for symbolic reasons, we're able to slice. That's what the sword does. It cuts. It cuts away the old. It cuts away the problem. A cut is a way of describing discernment. When you cut this away from that, you make very difficult, subtle decisions and choices. And we have big choices to make, and that's responsibility, both personally and collectively in our times. So gaining a new technology, a new knowledge, is what will help us invent the future. We think of technology as we generally experience it now. Our new devices, our new connections, our new ways of communicating and moving around. They are new swords for our time, with which we can either fight with each other or build something that works better than anything we've had before. Think about it. Think about the way you choose. On a personal level, the sword is usually additional skills. Learning is at the core of the entire hero model. It's learning, which is to say, changing. And learning is a very frustrating experience. Some people love school. Some people just wonder why anybody would go there. It's so painful. Of course it's painful. It's a sustained experience of feeling stupid. And that means I'm pushing myself, I'm challenging, and I'm reaching for my capacity. We want to become as well learned as we can be, as well developed as we're capable of. And that is some struggle. That has certainly got a lot of doubt in it. We're going to be afraid. We cannot do this without fear. We're going to stumble in our own dark places. We're going to struggle with our own demons, all in claiming the sword of effectiveness, the ability to cause something to happen in the world for the better. Everyone changes, even leaders and teachers. Everyone in a transformative journey will be changing. Even the guides that you will find in your own journey will change as a result of interacting with you. They will grow as well. And that's why, as a coach, I grow with every client I work with. And the change from grey to white is kind of a purification. It is also a gaining of wisdom. And that is what is at play in these stories. We survive. If we survive, we should be wiser for our trouble. Resurrection. The defeat is horrible. It feels like death and is usually described as a death and rebirth experience. Following that, you have resurrection, redemption, and return. These are slow and painful steps, but you realize you're still alive and that you have gained something for your trouble. Usually symbolized as a sword, which means you have new tools, new ways of thinking to use in your journey ahead. And you begin to take steps and realize you're strong. You're stronger for your trouble. You make new allies. You begin gaining steam here. And there are new problems to be solved. The journey back is every bit as long and taxing as the journey to the depth. The whole thing is quite an ordeal, but we are gaining something. And there is no other way to change. Change is an insulting, grueling experience. But if we want to maximize our potential, there is no other thing to do. As we realize that we're still alive, we begin to return to the game. Because it is a game. Life is. We return to the place of action, the battlefield. We get back to our work. But it's not the same person, same face, same name. Others may not notice any change, and the change may be subtle. It might simply be increased confidence. It might be increased hope or belief that the project is worth doing. But we do better at it. And people look back and say, couldn't I have done this without all that ordeal? Probably not. There is no other way to get away from the past and its limitations and into new potentialities. Some 3,000 years before the Common Era, there was a shift. There was a matriarchal system socially and a goddess tradition religiously that was the dominant way of seeing things. That's right, the feminine reigned. Things changed. Then the male gods came. Certainly more masculine ideas gained dominance. And that's what we live nowadays. But that masculine dominance is actually on the decline, is dying. But the feminine did not go away. It just didn't have the leading edge anymore. It was still very strong and present and a little bit underground. There is a notion that perhaps at some point it will shift back. And it's true. I see it, I feel it, that the feminine is shifting back. And rather, we need, at this point in time in our history, humanity needs to find balance of feminine and masculine. And this is what is happening right now in our culture, around the world, in our societies, in the collective. There is a need to integrate both. So the best of both working together in a kind of partnership culture is what is needed. A balance of the masculine and feminine energies in all of us, because both men and women have masculine and feminine energies that need to be balanced. And then at some point, probably after we've arrived somewhere, we might wonder, what have I missed? What else is there for me? Because I'm still not satisfied. And we go back to some of the things we set aside because they weren't convenient or efficient, or didn't seem like they would help us towards our goals, and begin to bring them back into our definition of ourselves. This is a stage of integration. It's not that we shift values and take a different side. It's more that we try for the holistic perspective. During a time of great growth, a nation might be very instrumental, very productive, a lot of energy put into factories and technologies. And then after we pollute the air a little too much, we might say, weren't there some other things we liked, like walking in the woods, enjoying a lake that wasn't too polluted. We might go back to trusting nature and beauty and the poetic side of things collectively and find some balance. Not that we tear the factories down, but we build a park next to them, or we just change some of the policies, like stop polluting. Things can be produced in a natural way in according to divine laws. But the motivation has to be love, not greed. If we survive the ordeal, if we return to the death-like moment, we have something for our trouble. Something called the boon, or the reward, or the elixir. A good word, elixir, a healing potion. And is symbolized in some stories as a vial of magical medicine. It's the new way of looking at things that will allow us to solve problems that seem intractable. This is what we get. And there isn't any other way. It involves a radical and disheveling learning process. We need all of that in ourselves. So yes, we need strong heroes and we need wonderful fools. One of the great advantages of studying the heroic journey is that it is a quest model. It suggests we need different answers for different stages of the adventure. It is a model involving change. It says, you don't know enough, not now. You need to go and learn some more things that you can see about where you are in the progression of the story. And you can realize this is not the end. You may be in the belly of the whale right now, but in all those old stories I read, you get out of that. You live on. The best part comes later. This is enormously important for people who are discouraged. This is not the end of the story. It is time to pick up ourselves and press on. If you're interested in the idea of using the film production process to discover new depth in yourself or transform your disempowering stories into ones that reflect who you really are, I can help you. If you found this useful, please like the video, share and subscribe the channel to help it grow into a community of awakened individuals, all living with the same goal in mind: freedom and personal sovereignty. My name is Roxana Fiamma, your spiritual guide, hero's journey and transformation coach, and this was the Conscious Cruising Podcast.